Hi, boys and girls. This is Miss Paradise. I will continue reading to you Race the Wild Great Reef Games. Here we go. Chapter 8 Not a Mermaid. Related to the elephant, but with a tail like a whale, it might have inspired tales of mermaids, but has no longer whiskers than locks. Finally, Dev cried, a clue that doesn't rhyme. Finally, Russell cried, a clue that I know the answer to. It's the dugong. Because the clues about locks of hair, not combination locks. Those things drive me crazy. Sage quickly thought ahead. They had already been in the water a while. Is everyone good to go? Sure. We should just search here, right? Dev said. Maybe we could save time and catch up. Sage looked at Mary again. The younger girl wasn't a strong swimmer to begin with, and she had been so sick the day before. Sage knew she should insist that they stop to rest, but she also yearned to keep going, to strive for the win. Let's do it, Mary said to Sage's surprise. They all dunked their faces in the water and started to search. Sage wanted to find a dugong as fast as possible. The faster Sage worked, the sooner they would all get a break. Sage remembered that sometimes, to escape sharks, dugongs would swim to the deeper waters of the reef. So she separated from the others and followed a winding path through the underwater towers of coral. The ocean floor began to drop away. The early morning sun did not reach to the bottom of the ocean floor here, and the water seemed murkier, the shadows darker. Sage sensed something move below her. She squinted, trying to focus. There it was again. She couldn't get a good look. If she wanted to find out what it was, she'd have to go deeper and dive with the snorkel on. She took a full breath and plunged down, pushing against the water. Whatever it was, it slid under a shelf of coral. In the darkness, Sage couldn't tell how big it was. She knew dugongs were shy. Maybe this mystery creature was the answer to the clue. Sage was starting to run out of air, but she worked her way lower. She was now even with the reef floor. All at once, a bundle of tiny arms burst from under the coral. The creature scuttled toward her with jagged movements. Its body was the size of a baseball. The wriggling bundle was covered in tiny rings that began to glow an intense peacock blue. Something strong seized Sage from behind and dragged her to the surface. She tried to scream, but water surged into her mouth. The sun flashed in her eyes, and her body quaked with coughs. Her arms lashed out as she tried to fight off whatever had grabbed her. It's me! It took Sage a second to register the voice. Then Marie appeared in front of her. Blue-ringed octopus, the younger girl sputtered. More deadly than jellyfish. She had Sage's arm now and was pulling her away. "No!" Sage yelled, finally finding her voice. She ripped her wrist off from Marie's grasp. "What are you doing? What are you doing here?" Marie turned back confused. Sage's mask was foggy. She could barely even see Marie, and she didn't want the other girl to see her. "You don't look out for me. It's not your job. I can take care of myself." "We got it," a voice called out. It sounded far away. "Sage! Mary!" Sage was still trying to catch her breath. Water dripped from her forehead down to the tip of her nose. Instinctively, her hand rushed to her ear. She still had her earring. "Russell got a photo of the dugong," Dev's voice called again. "We're here," Marie answered. She waved as the two snorkel pipes came into view. The boys' faces were stretched with smiles. "It was awesome. He got it in like record time," Dev said. "We're still waiting for the next clue to come in." "But show them," he prompted Russell. Just as Russell reached out to display the ANCAM screen, a shadow passed below. "No way!" "There it is again," he said, pointing underwater. The four kids lowered their faces into the water. Sage forced herself to take calm, even breaths through the snorkel. She tried to forget what had just happened and focused on the dugong. It was funny to think that the dugong, with its short, wide trunk, could have inspired stories of mermaids. But it was graceful, floating along the reef floor. Sage had always felt so at home in the water. Now she just wanted to be anywhere else. After the dugong had passed, the red team lifted their heads. "Let's go back to the boat," Mary said. Sage found a blue-ringed octopus, or it found her. They aren't common this far north, but I don't want to stick around to see it again. "Whoa! Those things are nasty," Dev said. The boys looked at Sage. She didn't say anything. The octopus hadn't stung her, but she still felt stunned. By the time they were back on the boat, they had received their next clue. It was a set of coordinates. "It must be where we get the next challenge," Russell said. "I'll show it to Javier and the captain," Dev suggested, looking to Sage for approval. Sage nodded and then went down to the girls' cabin and sat at the edge of her bed. She found her family photo in her bag. Since no phones or cameras were allowed, this is all she had. She had stared at it for a while. When she heard the yacht's motor rev up, she convinced herself to get her head back in the game. She found the rest of the team on the deck. They stopped talking at the sight of her. She had expected that. It happened a lot over the last year. In this case, it was a good thing. It gave them a chance to get their heads back in the race, too. But then Russell pushed Mary forward. "Sage," her teammate said, "we're worried." Sage took a breath and felt her shoulder draw back. Her chin lifted. "I went after you on purpose. We need to stick together. That's what teams do." It took Sage a moment to realize Mary was talking about what had happened at the reef. Mary looked at the ground. Her cheek twitched. "I don't care what you say. It is my job to look after you. It's all our jobs. We have to look after each other. Sage looked out to sea, avoiding her teammates' faces. Listen, Russell said. We know you want to be the team leader. You're good at it. And Mary's smart about animals. And Dev's good with gadgets. And I'm whatever I am. But we're all more than that. And you don't have to laugh at our jokes or tell us what you would want to do with the prize money. But we're a team. And you can't tell us not to have your back. Sage shifted her eyes to look in the other direction, but they locked at Russell's. He held her gaze and didn't look away. Look, she began, her voice soft. I was supposed to apply for the wildlife with my sister, but then she was in an accident. Sage hadn't told the story for so long. It had been almost a year of doctor's appointments and physical therapy. It seemed like forever. The doctor said she couldn't race, and I refused to do it without her. But my parents thought it would be good for me. She paused and let her eyes sweep over her teammates' faces. They probably just wanted me out of the house, so I gave in and promised myself that I would win. I would win so I could take Caroline everywhere she's always wanted to go. Sage didn't tell them about how she felt responsible for what had happened to her sister. It had been her job to look after Caroline at the track meets, but she hadn't even seen when Caroline had broken her shoulder and her arm. Sage had been competing on the other side of the track. Sage wouldn't have even been there if it hadn't been for Sage. Sage also didn't tell them that her earrings were a good luck gift from Caroline, just for the race. By the way Russell, Deb, and Mary looked at her, Sage knew she didn't have to tell them any of these things. Sometimes, during the race, I get caught up in all of that. I want to win so much, I try to take charge of everything. It feels like the only thing I can do, she said. And then, when Marie got sick, it reminded me of Caroline. Then, all I wanted was to make sure she would be okay. Sage was grateful for the silence that followed. And I was fine, Mary said after a while. You looked out for me, and I wanted to do the same for you. Sage couldn't look at Mary, but she gave a slight nod. Sage wasn't used to anyone looking out for her. That had always been her job. I get it, Russell added, his arms crossed. It's a good reason you want to win. Yeah, I'm all for winning, Dev admitted, but your sister would want you to have fun. You need to stop thinking about her accident. She'd want you to get the most of it. She wouldn't want you to run this race just to get first place. Yeah, Russell added. She'd want you to have good times and answer clues that end in rhymes. Russell burst out laughing at his attempt of poetry. Dev rolled his eyes, horrified. You started it, man, Russell claimed. You said, run this race just to get first place. Next year, you should get a job writing the clues. The look on Dev's face was hilarious, and Sage was soon doubled over with laughter, wiping fresh tears from her eyes. It was not long before Mary gave in. The red team had lost it. They were in no condition to run a race. Creature feature, dugong. Scientific name, dugong dugong. Type, mammal. Range, coastal waters of the Indian Ocean, Pacific Ocean, and neighboring seas. Food, seagrass. While it has a tail with two flukes, similar to a whale, the dugong is more closely related to an elephant. But other than the color of its thick skin, the dugong has a few physical traits in common with its big-eared cousins. Dugongs don't even have ear flaps. They do, however, have a large snout with a long upper lip for picking seagrass, which is this picky herbivore's first choice for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Its love of grass is the reason for its nickname, sea cow. This name can also refer to the dugong's close relative, the manatee.